Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I'm so glad you're here. And I hope your holiday season is off to a soft start. I know the holidays can be very triggering in a lot of ways and very complicated and overwhelming. And I just hope that you are doing all that you can do to make the holidays what you want them to be this year, because you really do have a lot of power around that. But it does boil down to making some hard choices, managing your mindset, and managing your emotional landscape. So this is actually going to be my final episode for 2021. I am not going to be dropping an episode on Christmas Day because it's Christmas. And I want to be fully present with my family and friends, and I want you to be fully present with yours. Besides, after this episode today, there will be 265 episodes for you to listen to if you really miss me that much. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, if you've listened to the show a few times now, you probably know that I run a membership community called Rumble&Rise. I mention it on almost every episode. And inside this community, I teach a monthly masterclass based on some of the themes that you've probably heard me talk about here on the show. Now, the difference between the podcast episodes and these masterclasses is that the masterclasses inside of Rumble&Rise go much deeper into topics, and I give members very actionable takeaways, and I support them throughout the month in applying what they've learned through weekly coaching calls. So I'm really proud of what this community has become. And you would be really hard pressed to find a wellness community that provides as much value as Rumble&Rise for only $59 a month. So today, at the close of the year, I thought I would share with you the road that we have traveled inside of the Rumble&Rise community over the past year and give you a key takeaway from each of these 12 masterclasses. I'm doing this for 3 reasons. Number 1, I, of course, want to show you that there is indeed a very different path that you could take to honor your health than what is being sold to you by traditional diet and fitness culture. The second reason I want to do this is because the work that I do inside of Rumble&Rise is actually what makes this podcast possible. You may have noticed that I don't have commercials. I don't have sponsors. I pay for the production of this podcast through the work that I do inside of Rumble&Rise. And I deeply believe in the work that we do inside that arena with all of my heart and soul. So I've had several people reach out to me this year asking how they can support the podcast. And one of the easiest ways to support the podcast is to become a member of Rumble&Rise. I promise you are only going to benefit from that membership. So, of course, the third reason I'm doing this episode today is to invite you to join us in 2022. So at the end of today's show, I am going to give you a coupon for 10% off an annual membership. And that 10% off is only going to be good from December 19th through December 29th of 2021. So 10 days. And I will never run this offer again. And I want to tell you how amazing this offer actually is. So normally when you buy 12 months of membership, I give you 2 months for free. So you're getting an entire year for $590. But today, with your additional 10% off, you're actually getting 12 months of membership for the price of 9. So this is a screaming deal. And to inspire you, let's dive into the topics of these masterclasses. And if you like what you hear and you want to learn more, head on over to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. Everything I tell you about today is still accessible inside the membership. So that's pretty awesome that I give my members access to all of my content. Now, when somebody first becomes a member of Rumble and Rise, the first place I ask them to start, of course, is with my 4-week program called the Consistency Code. So when you become a member, you get immediate access to this program. And the reason it's so important that my members begin there is because the Consistency Code is the structure that we use to apply everything that I teach inside of the membership. And there's really 4 parts to the Consistency Code: the practice of awareness, the practice of organization, the practice of follow-through, and the practice of realignment. And I just want to mention at the outset of this podcast that there are really 3 things I always teach about consistency. Number 1, consistency is a mindset. So we have to think in a way, we have to manage our brain in a way that allows us to continue showing up for ourselves. And that is a big part of the work that we do, is mindset management. Consistency is also a practice. You hear me use that word all the time, practice, because baked into that word is messiness and imperfection. Consistency is also a love language. And I love emphasizing this point so much because we consistently show up for the things that we really care about. And when you decide to really start caring about yourself, consistency is a beautiful way to express that. Now, inside the Rumble and Rise arena, the masterclasses I'm going to tell you about now, I really break these down into 4 different categories. So each month I teach one masterclass based on one of 4 topics. The topic is either about chemistry, how to balance the chemistry in your body, how to optimize the strategies you're using to create behavior change, how to manage your mindset so you'll actually show up and do the work you told yourself you'd do, and emotional agility. So each of these masterclasses is based on one of those themes, and I'm constantly rotating those themes. So we started the year off in January, of course, with the theme of cultivating courage. So when you think about health, you might think, well, how does that have anything to do with health? Well, one of the biggest regrets that people have on their deathbed is that they wish they had had the courage to live a life true to themselves, rather than living a life that other people expected them to live. And going after the things on your heart, going after the things you truly want for your life is going to require that you practice courage. Courage of thought, courage of emotion, courage to take action. And emerging from 2020 in the throes of COVID shutdowns and entering a very uncertain year ahead, while courage is always relevant, it felt especially relevant at the start of 2021 to be talking about the importance of courage. If the past 2 years have taught us anything, it's that life is uncertain. It's always been uncertain, but I think that was a glaringly obvious fact during everything we've endured over the past couple of years. And like I said, it takes courage to go after the things that you want to go after when there's no guarantee of how it is going to turn out. Going after what you truly want for your health and your life this year, any year, is going to require deep honesty with yourself, the willingness to take risks, and a really big capacity to rumble with difficult things. Creating new things for your life is going to require that you do things that you have never done before. And when you do new things, when you practice new skills, you are going to have to be a beginner. You are going to have to be willing to lean into imperfection and screw up, because that's the way of it. Think about all the things that you will need to be brave about in order to improve your health. Letting go of things that no longer serve you. setting boundaries when it makes other people uncomfortable, radical honesty, learning new things. All of those require courage. So I want to give you one key takeaway from this lesson. And remember, there's a lot of takeaways in these masterclasses. I'm just giving you one tiny little nugget. And the nugget I'm going to leave with you here is that we have to practice feeling courage. Courage is an emotion that you have the ability to generate at any time. And how do you generate it? You generate it by the way you think about your life. You generate it by the way you think about yourself and your own ability. So courage is something that we can generate. It is also the willingness to feel difficult emotions. And I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but we like to cherry pick emotions. We like to feel the good stuff, but not the hard stuff. But the thing with behavior change is there will most definitely be discomfort. There will definitely be difficult emotions that we have to stand in the arena with. And when those emotions show up, we really have three choices. We can resist them, we can avoid them, or we can allow them a seat at the table. And we often tell ourselves that, well, if I allow them a seat at the table, they're never going to leave. But that's not true. Emotions just have messages for you. They're just messengers. And once they have told you their message, they will dissipate eventually. But boy, the things that we do to resist and avoid emotion, those things are costing us our health. We drink to avoid emotion. We eat to avoid emotion. We overwork to avoid emotion. We do all kinds of things to resist and avoid emotion. And if you really want to practice courage in the year ahead, I would invite you to feel all emotion. And that is going to require courage. In February of this year, we tackled the art of self-discipline. And why? So many reasons. You can't change your life without self-discipline. But man, a lot of people do try. They try to keep doing the same things that they've been doing for years and expect a different result. Right? Behaving in the same ways. We have to behave in new ways. And not only do we have to behave in new ways, we have to be very disciplined about those new behaviors. The other reason self-discipline is so important when it comes to our health is it allows us to live with intention. It allows us to live in integrity with ourselves. And I'm a big believer that self-discipline is really the linchpin to self-leadership. Now, I know a lot of people hear the word discipline and they want to retreat because they associate it with like the discipline of their parents or something outside of themselves. But the discipline that I teach is that self-discipline is an extension of self-respect and self-love. Knowing who you are and what you want and structuring your life in a way that allows you to go after that and stay focused on the way to getting there, that is self-discipline. And self-discipline informs the practices that we commit to. It helps us to decide where we will put our focus, our time, our energy. And it allows us to consider our long-term focus, who we are becoming through the things that we practice. So one key takeaway I'm going to leave you with from this masterclass today, again, this is a tiny nugget from the class, is like I said before, you are going to have to rumble with hard emotion, with difficult emotion to create change in your life. That is the nature of the beast. But one of the things that will help you to stay the course, to help you be self-disciplined, is to give your discomfort meaning and purpose. Think about it. When you face obstacles and challenges along the path to change, and you most certainly will, you could look at that as a reason to quit, or you could look at it as a curriculum for self-development. I really invite you to consider the latter. In fact, I'm going to even take it a step further and say not only would I invite you to consider obstacles and challenges as a curriculum for self-development, but I would also invite you to choose to feel difficult emotions on purpose, because it's the only way you will ever stop fearing them. Now, please don't hear me saying you need to needlessly suffer. You don't. But referencing what I said earlier, when you invite emotions to the table, they usually have a reason for being there. Get curious about what those reasons are, and let that knowledge inform how you proceed. In March, we did a deep dive into chemistry of the human body. We talked about managing blood sugar and why it matters. And, there's a misconception that food is the only thing that affects blood sugar. And of course, food can massively impact blood sugar, but it is by no means the only thing. Stress, in all of its forms, affects blood sugar. Think about it. When we have elevated stress, we have elevated cortisol, and cortisol elevates blood sugar. So if you live a high-stressed life and you eat in ways that promote high amounts of sugar in the blood, your body can use some of that blood sugar for fuel. It can store a little bit in the liver and in muscle cells, but everything else is really going to get shuttled to fat storage. And eventually, we can start developing conditions like insulin resistance when our blood sugar is too high for too long. And insulin resistance, in the most summarized form, is when the cells become deaf to insulin, which means sugar can't get out of the blood. So your blood sugar remains really high. And one of the nuggets I just want to share from this masterclass with you today is that I work with a lot of women in the perimenopause and menopausal years. And something that's really fascinating to know about blood sugar is that the hormones estrogen and progesterone affect how your cells respond to insulin. So what this means is high blood sugar really seems to play a role in worsening menopause discomfort. And in one study of nearly 1,000 postmenopausal women, having higher blood sugar levels was linked to more physical and psychological menopausal symptoms. So it makes sense that we maybe face some new challenges with blood sugar in the perimenopausal and menopausal years. So understanding blood sugar is a really empowering part of your health journey at that age and stage of life. In April, we did a dive into meal planning. Now, I want to be really clear here that I do not give out meal plans. That is not the work that I'm interested in teaching. I do not think it's effective for the long term with people. So I don't teach meal plans. I don't give people meal plans. I don't sell meal plans. What I do is I teach my students and my clients how to plan their own meals based on their own food philosophy. Not mine, not their sisters, not their cousins, not their coworkers, but theirs. Meal planning helps to keep you honest and accountable and organized. It's almost like data collection. And the thing that I find so funny about meal planning is do we have a lot of stories about how hard it is and how inconvenient it is and how, time consuming, all the things. And yet, rarely do I hear those same arguments when people are talking about their bank account or, systemizing and strategizing around their finances. If you really want to be honest with yourself about what you're doing, collect data. And if you really want to make progress in a relationship in your life, like your relationship with food, it makes sense that you would get very detailed about the strategy that you're using to do that. Meal planning also allows you to be incredibly intentional about food rather than reactive to it. I think we can all agree that we have the potential to make our relationship with food incredibly complicated because we eat for a lot of reasons other than nourishing our body. And food systems have changed, right? The quality of our food has changed. And life has gotten so busy that it's really easy to be reactive around food. So meal planning helps you to figure out, it helps you to pre-decide, and it helps you to figure out what works best for you. It helps you to simplify food, and it helps you to nourish yourself well, consistently. Now, I mentioned food philosophy earlier, and I've actually done a podcast on this in the past. You can actually just go to my website and type in the search bar, food philosophy, to find that episode. But basically, in the age of diet dogma and copious amounts of nutrition information available at your fingertips, I think it's really important to understand your food philosophy around nutrition and why you believe the things that you do. So a food philosophy in a nutshell is your belief system about nutrition. Knowing what you believe about food helps you to better assess if you're living in alignment with what you actually believe. It's kind of like knowing your philosophy on relationships. What do you want in a relationship with another person? What do you not want? What will you tolerate in the behavior of others? What won't you tolerate? So you might have a belief in eating for pleasure or entertainment. Somebody else might not. You might believe that you shouldn't eat animal products or you don't want to eat animal products, but somebody else might not have that belief. You may have the belief everything in moderation. That feels good to you, but it may not feel good to somebody else with certain foods. So in this masterclass, I invite listeners to get wildly curious about their beliefs around food. And of course, we do a lot of coaching around this because there's a lot of conversations that come up around this. But consider for yourself, what types of foods do you believe nourish your body? How many meals do you feel help you to feel supported throughout the day nutritionally? Why do you believe those things? Where did you learn those things? Are they working for you? In May, inside of Rumble&Rise, we migrated into the topic of focus. Now, focus is something I'm hugely passionate about, especially in the health conversation, because we're living in an age of tremendous opportunity. I mean, good Lord, right? The age of the internet has given us so many options, so many choices. We also have so much opportunity for immediate gratification. So it's really easy to lose our focus. We're also living in a time that has totally normalized distraction, right? So looking at your cell phone all day, every day, it's like everywhere you go, that's what you see people doing. But the truth is, without being able to focus, which I believe is becoming a lost art, you will struggle to make meaningful progress in any area of your life, including your health. Distraction is the death of consistency, right? If we don't stay focused, we won't stay consistent. And focus, being able to focus, allows you to create a deeply expressed and authentic life. Who doesn't want that? So a little mini takeaway from this masterclass is to make decisions by design rather than by default. If you don't make intentional decisions about your life, the outside world will happily do it for you. You will live your life in reaction mode. Busy with action does not mean that you're busy with the right kinds of actions that serve the kind of life you want to live. So what are you doing in your day right now to be very intentional about your time, about your energy, about your resources? In this masterclass, I talk about turning your values into time, getting very intentional about how you spend your time and making sure that the things you value are showing up on your schedule every day. And one of the things that I deeply believe, and I talk about this a lot, is that learning how to manage your time and energy is really pain management. Because we get ourselves into a whole lot of integrity pain with ourselves. Remember, integrity pain is when your actions are misaligned with what you said you wanted for your life. And we get into a lot of integrity pain when we're not managing our time and energy in a way that's in line with our values. In June, we talked all about relationships. Why? Because life is relationship. Relationship with self, relationship with others, even relationships with people who are long dead. We still have relationships with those people because we still think about those people. We have relationship with food and exercise and our environment. And the beautiful thing about relationship is that that's how we learn about ourselves. And the better we know ourselves, the better we can lead ourselves. And when it comes to your health, the quality of your relationships will hugely impact the chemistry and behavior that influences your health. Because again, like I said earlier, stress ignites cortisol, and cortisol ignites a cascade of hormonal consequences that impact our physiology. And the quality of your relationships can absolutely create a lot of unnecessary stress. So a little nugget I want to leave you with is really what a relationship is. A relationship is really the thoughts you have about another person. Your relationship with anyone is dependent on the thoughts you have about them. And when you think about that, there's a lot of places that can go horribly wrong. So someone in my life says something to me, and my brain goes to work interpreting that in a certain way. And then I say something in response based on how I interpreted that. And then they do the same thing. Their brain goes to work putting meaning on what you said based on their history, based on their beliefs. And then they respond based on that as well. So the way we think about other people, the way we think about other people's behavior is where all of our power and control is inside of relationships. Obviously, we can't control other people, but we always have control over the thoughts that we choose to think about other people. So the truth is, no one can make you feel love. No one can make you feel mad. No one can make you feel hurt. And I know those are big statements, and there's a lot of stuff that boils up for people when I say that. But the truth is, people say words and you place meaning on those words. And that's what hurts, is the meaning that you place on those things. Thoughts are optional. And taking responsibility for how you think about everything will massively influence your health story. Because think about it, when you feel like hell, because emotionally you feel like hell, we tend to resist or avoid emotion by eating or drinking or doing all kinds of things that really don't serve our health in the long term. But when we take radical responsibility for managing our brain and the meaning we place on things, we don't act out. We don't have to resist or avoid. In July, we talked about leading the dance with sugar. So sugar comes up a lot. So what exactly does it mean to lead the dance with sugar? It means that you are deciding the speed, the intensity, and the steps of the dance that you dance with sugar. Now, specifically in this masterclass, I was talking about processed sugar. I talk a lot about the chemistry of sugar and the different layers of sugar. A lot of women I coach rumble with sugar in big ways. So they're eating more than they'd like to. They're eating forms of sugar that they know don't really provide any kind of nutritional value. They're eating sugar for a lot of reasons other than hunger. And ultimately, they feel like sugar is pulling them out of integrity with themselves. So one little takeaway I'll give you from this masterclass is everybody rumbles with sugar differently. And why is that true? Because humans are all very diverse and variable creations, meaning some of us just have a natural like for sugar more than others. Maybe that's genetic, or maybe we just have different conditioning throughout our life around sugar, or it could be both. So everyone has a different history with sugar. Some people use sugar as a coping mechanism. Some people never learned that or never practiced that. Some people have eaten a lot of sugar throughout their lives. Some people haven't. So everybody's different genetics, different likes, different dislikes, different dosage, different history. So my relationship with sugar will not be the same as your relationship with sugar. And I feel like that truth allows people to be so much more graceful with themselves. You aren't better or worse than somebody because of your relationship with sugar. But for all of these reasons, you may rumble with it harder than someone else, and that's okay. In August, very appropriately, we talked all about restoration. And not just restoration of sleep, but restoration outside of sleep. So we talked a lot about play and creativity. We talked about restoring adventure into our lives, restoring connection with ourselves and with others. Women are not only exhausted from lack of sleep, but from lack of doing things that put life in their life. A lot, again, because I work with perimenopausal and menopausal sort of populations. I work with outliers of those populations, of course, but that is probably the bulk of the community that I work with. And at that age and stage of life, we often start to realize that we've strayed from ourselves a little bit. We've lost a little bit of ourselves. And restoration, baking that into our days and into our lives, allows us to reclaim ourselves. I also see a lot of women struggling with giving themselves permission to be happy and joyful and play and be goofy and do things just for the sake of doing them. Inside that class, we also talked about the health benefits, of course, of restoration, all the ways that restoration affects chemistry. And one tiny little piece of this masterclass that I'll leave with you is that when we give ourselves permission to play and to be creative and to pursue sort of that space of creative flow, maybe that's by sitting down to write, maybe it's by creating art, maybe you find your creative flow in listening to music or moving your body. But what happens in those endeavors is your brain waves actually slow down. And your prefrontal cortex, which is the really thinking part of your brain, temporarily deactivates. Or another way of saying that is it goes quiet, which makes us less critical of our ideas and more courageous, which I talked about at the start of this podcast. So during those creative moments that you give yourself permission for, your brain also releases an enormous cascade of neurochemistry. Things like endorphins and serotonin and dopamine. And these are ways of actually releasing and creating forms of pleasure that serve our well-being rather than deplete our well-being. Because we're living in a world where there's a lot of false pleasures that are around us, right? Like concentrated sugar, concentrated social media, alcohol, like all these things that make us feel better temporarily, but then they have all these consequences on the other side. Where things like creativity ignite your brain in all the same ways and make you feel good without the negative consequences. In September, we talked about recommitment because it makes a lot of sense that along your path to change, you are going to lose focus, you are going to get distracted, and recommitment is a daily practice. And a lot of people say they're committed to a certain behavior change, but commitment is not the same as interest. Commitment means no matter what. Interest means maybe when I find the time. So I talk about kind of 3 different levels of commitment in this masterclass. I talk about the one-toe dip, which is like you're just interested. You're not really committed. You're just dipping your toe in the pool to test the temperature, to see if maybe you want to get in. And then we have the waist-deep wade of commitment, which means you commit, but you only commit a few times a year for a certain period of time. This always reminds me of the diet industry, right? Like right at the new year, or before your high school reunion, or before that wedding, you get really committed to making change. It's only when inspiration strikes, but it's not consistent throughout the year. But the level of commitment that I really try to inspire in my students and clients is the full body plunge. And the full body plunge is that you recommit daily because you are in it for the long haul. And one piece of this that I'll leave with you from this masterclass is that a lot of us are commitment adverse for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is we don't want to be bored. Right? I hear this a lot, like I'm bored with my food. I'm bored with my exercise program. I'm bored with fill in the blank. But think about all the things that you do every single day because you want the benefit on the other side and you don't put the label on it of being bored. Like, quite frankly, I don't find brushing my teeth all that exhilarating. Making my bed, not super exciting. Walking my dog, I like it. I enjoy it. But it's definitely a repetitive thing I do twice a day that I could label as boring. But I'm not going to stop walking my dog because I get bored. So to become extraordinary, we have to be willing to do the ordinary repeatedly. And how you think about repetition has a large bearing on whether or not you will actually do it repeatedly. And if you're thinking about it as boredom, I promise you won't keep doing it. So how else might you think about this? What are the things about this that you enjoy? So while I may not be super excited about my exercise program that I have outlined for today, I am excited that I'm creating the time and space to nurture my physical being. I get to listen to great music. I get to have an hour to myself. There is excitement within that activity that I could also label as being bored. There's options. In October, we talked all about anti-inflammatory living because the health challenges that we face over the course of our lifetime are not actually the problem. They are symptoms of a problem, and that problem is chronic inflammation. And we often hear phrases like anti-inflammatory diet thrown around, but inflammation is not caused by a singular thing, just like high blood sugar is not caused by a singular thing like your diet. What creates and fuels inflammation is multifaceted. I also chose this topic in October because in the era of COVID, the conversation is super relevant because we know that COVID is an inflammatory condition. And when we have high levels of inflammation, we may have worse outcomes. So one of the takeaways that I shared in this masterclass is that everyone experiences inflammation very differently, right? Some people may experience inflammation as weight gain. Some people may experience it as chronic headaches or getting migraines on occasion. Some people might have autoimmune disorders. Your joints might hurt. You might have horrible PMS. Inflammation shows up in so many different ways. And why is that true? Well, because again, we're all designed differently and we live very different lives, right? And when I say designed differently, I'm speaking to like our genetic blueprint. So age, it definitely influences inflammation. We tend to produce less anti-inflammatory chemicals as we age. And of course, our hormones shift. Genetics play into how we experience inflammation. Your gut microbiome affects inflammation. Your nervous system, your liver health, your thyroid health, viruses, infections, your lifestyle, all of these things influence inflammation. And I always think of inflammation as a bucket, right? And if your bucket is overflowing with stressors, you're probably going to have a worse inflammatory response, right? So your inflammation is directly proportional to your total stress load. So how can we unpack stress? That's really the question. Where are the spaces and places in your life where you can unpack stress? You can't unpack your genetics, but you can certainly unpack the things that influence your genetics. And that's really what we talked about in that masterclass, all the ways in which to unpack. November, such a fun month. We talked about moving your life to higher ground, specifically moving your body. Because modern day life has us more sedentary than ever. And the modern day woman really has two modes, sitting or spinning. I think that's a quote I heard from Katie Bowman. I just thought it was so funny because it's true, right? Like a lot of people are sitting all day and then they're going to spin class or they're getting on their Peloton. And please don't hear me knocking Peloton, right? I know lots of people who use Peloton and love it. But seriously, if you're sitting at a desk all day and then your primary mode of movement is getting on a bike, you might want to reconsider that. You might want to consider pollinating in some other movement. The other truth is that exercise is not enough. We really have to change our perspective on movement, that our body needs a lot of it, and that exercise is a piece of movement, but it doesn't complete or shouldn't complete our movement profile in the day. And I work with a lot of very busy women looking for simple answers. So in this masterclass, we really talked about ways to pollinate our day with more movement. So the reason that this is so important is that the body's movements influence our cellular health. They also influence our brain functions, like processing information and decision-making. So understanding and interpreting the world around us is not just happening through the brain, but also through movement. There's a phrase for this. It's called embodied cognition. And it's the idea that the mind is not only connected to the body, but the body influences the mind. So as you move your body more, it makes a lot of sense that you feel more focused and more creative and more alive and a little bit more solution-oriented rather than problem-focused. Movement supports brain health and function in so many ways. It helps our brain to grow new neurons and thrive, right? This is what neurogenesis is, growing new brain cells. And movement gives new cells a purpose. So those cells want to stick around rather than die off. Movement helps us to, again, promote brain health. It helps us to slow age-related mental decline. It helps us to recover if our brain gets injured or inflamed in some way. It lowers oxidative stress. So the correlation between movement and brain health is significant. And we're just talking about one part of the body, the brain, right? There's so much more benefit to all the ways that movement benefits the body, which I think we hear a lot more about. But we often don't think about how impactful movement is to our psychology. So that's why I wanted to share that piece of this masterclass with you. And then finally, this last month of the year, the title of our masterclass was Finish Strong, Start Stronger. And the reason I picked this title and this focus was because vision gets very muddled at the end of the year. Women are tired. They have a lot more responsibility being piled on an already very full schedule. It's really easy to find reasons that we can't focus on our self-care at the end of the year. And the way that I see the holiday season is that it presents us with a lot of opportunity to see how well we practiced certain self-development skills throughout the year. Why is that true? Because your reactions are a testament to your practices. And there's a lot of triggers, a lot of opportunity for stress around the holidays. And so as we observe ourselves at this time of the year, we can see how our practices have served us. And we can also see where we might still need to be doing some work in order to react differently in the future. So one of the takeaways I want to give you from this masterclass was I talk a lot about learning how to fail well. You know, a lot of people this time of year are setting goals for the year ahead, which I'm not against in any way, shape, or form. I think it can be really useful. But the way we set goals is kind of flawed because we set a goal and think that the process to achieving it's going to be linear and seamless and beautiful, and it rarely, if ever, is. And so when the obstacles and challenges show up, again, we choose to think thoughts that make us want to quit. And I just want to invite you to consider that setting goals is really about who you become on the way to getting there. And part of who you become is someone who either wrestles with failure well or you don't, right? You don't fail well. And when you don't fail well, what does that mean? It means that you kind of fail on purpose. You avoid discomfort. You stagnate. You don't persevere. You don't learn from your mistakes. You hide from taking action. We call this an escape fail. An escape fail is really escaping failure. You fail one time, you make that mean something that hurts, and you don't try it again. Versus a worth fail. A worth fail is still failing. You still make mistakes. You still screw up. You still get messy. But you take what you learn from that to propel you forward. So you're not getting the exact results from the actions you took that you wanted, but you're not making that mean that you should quit. You're using it as the opportunity it is, which is to learn. So are you escape failing or are you worth failing? All right, so that was really in a very fast and furious 45 minutes, a recap of the road we have traveled in the past 12 months inside of Rumble&Rise. And so if any of this kind of lit you up and you're like, oh, yes, I want more of that. Oh, yes, I need to develop that skill. I really strongly would invite you. Strongly invite you. Is that a thing? I don't know. It feels like a thing. But come join us in 2022. I am so excited for the year ahead and all that we're going to tackle next year. I will tell you, I did say this at the beginning of the class, but I'll just repeat it here, that there are 4 categories of the type of masterclass that I teach. And I rotate the type that I choose to teach each month. So our masterclasses are either based on chemistry, strategy, mindset management, or emotional management. Those are the 4 categories. And at the start of every month, I teach a masterclass. I give participants some very clear action steps for how to apply what they've learned. I ask them to choose a focus for the month, completely of their own choosing. So I don't control that. I invite them to consider where they want their focus to be for the month. I give them tremendous opportunity for support and coaching and deep dives throughout the month. We have an amazing community of women. We have tremendous amounts of resources to help support your process. And everything is housed on a private podcast channel. So just like you listen to the Grace and Grit podcast, you can listen to all of the content inside of Rumble&Rise from your phone. So if you are ready to stop outsourcing your life to someone else, if you are ready to embrace self-leadership in the health arena and well beyond, and if you're ready to do the work that it will take you to really learn how to like who you are, what you do, and why you do the things that you do, I think this would be an awesome space for you. So you can check out all the details of Rumble&Rise by going to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. And if you decide to join us at checkout, when you choose the annual option, you can enter the code HOLIDAYRR to get 10% off the already reduced annual price. So again, graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. And the code for the annual membership checkout is HOLIDAYRR. I really hope I'll be seeing you on the inside. Have a wonderful and safe holiday, and I will see you in 2022. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.